Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've ever felt like your career is just this endless, exhausting treadmill of emails, meetings, and literally just putting out fires all day long, you are definitely not alone. But today, we're stepping off that treadmill. We're going to explore the 7 habits of highly successful people. And no, this isn't one of those generic listicles you see floating around the internet. Let's dive right in. We're looking at a completely evidence-based, transformative blueprint drawn directly from faculty research at the London Business School. These experts study highly effective people every single day, and they've identified patterns based on human progress, wellness, and integrity that genuinely reshape how we live and work.
So here's our game plan for today. 1. Redefining modern success. 2. Mastering your inner foundation. 3. Sparking cognitive agility. 4. Gaining the interpersonal edge. And finally, 5. Your blueprint for success.
Kicking things off with Section 1, redefining modern success and mastering your inner foundation. To start things off, we really need to shatter this illusion that perpetual busyness somehow equals actual success. Seriously, I want you to take a second and mentally lock in an answer to this question. What are your top priorities right now? I mean, in your work, in your life, right at this very moment. You got them? Okay. Keep those front and center in your head because Adjuncts Professor Richard Jolly has a pretty eye-opening exercise for us.
Imagine if I were to open up your calendar from the last 3 months. How much time did you actually spend working on those exact priorities you just thought of? The protective boundary between work and life has pretty much exploded for most of us, right? It's just merged into one giant stress ball. And the harsh reality for most high flyers is that they end up spending way too much time on totally inconsequential things, leaving almost zero time for the stuff they actually claim is important. The answer for a lot of people is a truly shocking 1%. Yeah, 1%. Professor Jolly found that some chief executives actually confess to spending as little as 1% of their time on the things that will drive the future success of their business. Why? Because they're completely trapped in the stress of the present. Highly successful people, though, possess a really rare habit. They are absolutely ruthless with their time. They focus their energy only on what truly matters. So the whole point is summarized perfectly by Professor of Finance Alex Edmans. He says, we are human beings, not human doings. It's so incredibly easy to neglect our health because, well, the consequences are usually long-term. But the most successful people, they actively prioritize physical and mental wellness. They'll use team sports to build connection, or maybe go for a run just to break that perpetual email bombardment. They realize that constantly checking emails, even when you're on vacation, or treating social time like it's just another chore, literally robs you of experiencing the true depth of life. You've got to ground yourself first if you want to be truly effective.
Moving right along to Section 2, Sparking cognitive agility and rewiring the brain for success. Now, this is all about how we can bypass our natural anxiety and risk aversion. And it turns out, a simple shift in framing actually changes your brain chemistry. Professor of Organizational Behavior Dan Cable points out that we are naturally resistant to change. Think about it. If you frame a task as a performance, telling yourself, I absolutely must do well or I'm going to face backlash, bam, you trigger anxiety. You become rigid. You become risk-averse. But if you flip that and use learning framing, just saying to yourself, I wonder what I'll discover today, you trigger curiosity instead. You instantly become bolder, way more determined, and so much more likely to step outside your comfort zone.
Cable also explains that to actually become more curious, we've got to build what he calls experimental safe zones. Look, when you're driven by the fear of losing your job, that's extrinsic motivation. Sure, you might work hard, but you definitely won't be creative. But when you are intrinsically motivated, fueled by your own enthusiasm and a genuine desire to explore, that's when you unleash true creativity. You basically stop being a skeptic and you start being an eager explorer. But wait, there is a massive roadblock to this kind of curiosity. Adjunct Professor of Marketing Richard Heitner calls it the narcotic of negativity. And wow, what a brilliant metaphor that is. Negativity in the workplace can actually feel kind of euphoric and bonding in the moment. Complaining around the water cooler. But it is a toxic culture killer. It literally kills culture for sport. Saying things like, we simply don't have time for this. Well, that dulls the senses over time and destroys innovation before it can even take a breath. So how exactly do we combat that negativity? Well, Heitner gives us these 5 daily practices for creativity. Number 1, snack little and often on curiosity. Just take your blinkers off. 2, hydrate regularly with positivity. Learn to fall in love with your colleagues' ideas, not just your own.
3. Inhale fresh ideas from totally outside your industry. 4. Digest your problems slowly. Don't just swallow the very first solution that comes up. Rip it apart with a random group of people. And 5. Get out of the office every single day and leave your devices behind. Creativity isn't just some gimmick for the marketing department. It's a wholesome daily habit for absolutely everyone.
All right, section 3, gaining the interpersonal edge and translating internal clarity to external influence.
So now that we've mastered the inner self, let's see how that actually translates into powerful leadership. Associate Professor Jillian Koo heavily emphasizes the habit of perspective taking. Now, ruthless negotiators, they often have this winner-takes-all mentality. They treat their competitor like some comic book nemesis. But if you practice perspective taking, you view your competitor as a rational, passionate party with their own legitimate interests. By actively walking in their shoes, you actually reduce prejudice, you make your own team way more creative, and in negotiations, you can actually find ways to grow the pie and ultimately gain a much larger share for yourself. Talk about a win-win. Another absolutely incredible interpersonal habit is the ability to nudge for good. Assistant Professor Lisa Shu describes highly successful managers as choice architects. I love that term. These are leaders who consciously design the everyday decision-making context for their employees. They understand that every single choice they make creates a knock-on effect, and even the simplest prompts can gently steer people toward positive behaviors, all without actually limiting their freedom of choice. Here is a perfect example straight from Shu's research. Let's say you want honest expense reporting. Just move the signature line. That's it. Simply asking for a signature at the very beginning of the form rather than the end brings moral standards sharply into focus exactly when it matters most. It's such a gentle nudge, but it creates this massive ripple effect for ethical and financial integrity. Simple, but incredibly effective. Now, speaking of negotiation and influence, let's look at a really popular workplace myth. The myth says that you should always wait for the other side to speak first in a negotiation so you can gain insight, right? We've all heard that. But Professor Thomas Musweiler's research shows the reality is totally different. More often than not, you should move first. Why? Because of the anchoring effect. When people hear an initial number, they automatically move their own judgment toward that anchor. To prove just how powerful this anchor really is, Musweiler and his colleagues tested it on actual experts, German car mechanics. Customers brought in a used car and threw out an initial anchor price. Half of them gave a low anchor of 2,800 marks. The other half threw out a high anchor of 5,000 marks. The result? It's crazy. The expert mechanics valued the exact same car 1,000 marks higher simply because they heard the high anchor first. Even literal experts fall prey to the distortions of the mind when a first offer is made. But, and this is a big but, there is a critical exception here. Highly successful people know exactly when not to make the first offer. Musweiler warns that if you are in a totally new situation and there are just way too many unknowns, hold tight. In that specific scenario, sit back and let the other party make the first move. And that brings us to section 4, your blueprint for success, bringing it all together. We've definitely covered a lot of ground today, right? Going from internal wellness to cognitive framing, all the way out to behavioral nudges and negotiation tactics. To tie this whole thing together, consider this incredible insight from Richard Jolly. We so often think that if we attain money, status, or power, happiness will just automatically follow. But Jolly finds that happiness does not always ensue from success. In fact, it is the exact opposite. Success stems from happiness. Let that sink in. These 7 habits, prioritizing wellness, perspective-taking, curiosity, nudging for good, anchoring negotiations, focusing energy, and cherishing creativity, they're fundamentally about finding wellness and happiness first. That is the true engine of high performance. As we wrap up, remember that knowledge is only power if you actually apply it. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Which of these 7 habits will you change today? Don't just sit around and wait for your calendar to magically clear up, because let's be real, it won't. Pick just one insight from this explainer, whether it's taking a walk without your phone, or maybe just moving a signature line on a form. Start engineering your own success today.